Well, hello there. Thanks for being back with us on the Doing What Matters podcast. I'm your host, Teresa McCloy, and I am beyond excited to have you join us today. We have another engaging conversation about living from rest, not rush. I know for most of you that are listening, you're kind of tired of the daily grind, the constant rush, the hustle, and you're really trying to carve out time for something more, something that's meaningful, that resonates with you and your mind and your body and your soul. And if so, you're in the right place today, and I have the right guest for you because she's right along with us on the journey of all these things of living from rest, not rush. So, Kathy Goller, welcome to the podcast of Doing What Matters.
Thanks so much, Teresa. I'm so excited to be joining you today.
Well, Kathy and I have known each other now for a couple of years. She's actually one of our certified coaches. So you've heard me talk here on the podcast about different people that use some of our core content and the work they're doing. And I am so proud that Kathy is one of our peeps, one of our community, and she just has an amazing story in just how she's leaning into the work that God has for her to do. So, Kathy, I want to take you back a few years. We're going to dive right in and just go back to probably 3 or 4 years ago, because as you, the listener, listening, many times you're like, where was this person? What were they doing? Where were they at? So, give us a little backstory for those that are listening in.
Sure thing. So 4 years ago from this date, I was working in ministry in the Catholic Church. I worked on the diocesan level, supporting a lot of our local churches, specifically in youth and young adult ministry, and loved what I did. I got to work with some amazing young people, and then also really some amazing adults who supported and led those ministries on the local level. So it allowed me to do a lot of presenting and coaching and consulting and relationship building. And I had done that for about 20 years, actually over 20 years.
Wow.
And it was fantastic. And then the pandemic. And due to some of the pressures of the pandemic and some other things that were happening in our local area in the church, that position was no longer available to me. And so I found myself kind of in midlife saying, okay, what do I want to be when I grow up? And it's a very long and twisty, turny journey, as those things very often are. But it involved, the one benefit, if I can say, of the pandemic was having so much learning online and much more easily accessible. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to do learning in all kinds of things that I had been interested in and dabbled in previously, things like the CliftonStrengths assessment and the Enneagram. And hey, what's coaching really all about? And so pretty early on in my journey, I had this dream or this vision of my own coaching and presenting practice, but honestly had no idea what that could really look like. And I really doubted that I could make that happen. But fast forward through the very twisty, turny journey, and here I am with my own coaching business, doing coaching individuals and groups and presenting and using all those tools that I'd done all that learning about. It's been a really amazing journey to, as you've mentioned, like to see what God has done with that situation.
Yeah. Well, thank you for kind of filling in some of the dots and the gaps along the way. And that kind of brings us to where you are currently and what you're doing. But before we get to that conversation, I want to back up just a little bit for you who are listening in to say, what are some things, when you look back at that pandemic moment? And I know what I did during the pandemic. My twist, as you said, twisty, turny journey. I love that. Like my twist in there was actually starting the certification program that you've been a part of. And I know if you're listening in, you probably remember the pandemic moments for you. What was some of the things that were unrest for you during that time where you came to that decision of like, can I do this? What are some of the things you were feeling? You might have been doubting. what was kind of going on internally for you in
Mm.
that season?
Yeah. And I'm sure partly the pandemic, partly also just job loss and finding myself adrift. I wasn't an accountant, so to speak, who could just go out and get another accounting job. Like the job I had was pretty unique. So it was really a time of feeling adrift in a lot of ways. And I recognize now the loss and all the levels of loss. So I think that's one thing that, we have that societal loss of all the losses we were experiencing in the pandemic. I had a job loss, but that also impacted tons of my relationships. Um, the people I worked with, I was extremely close with, and now we weren't together anymore. The people we served, I was also close with. And the pandemic just, unmoored all of us into different corners. All of the rhythms and routines of my daily life were gone and totally
Mm,
changed. So it really was a time of, I don't know that I can say I wasn't resting, but it was feeling unmoored. And so there was a little bit of franticness of trying to figure out what's next.
yeah.
One perhaps advantage was because almost the world was in a way resting. Certainly lots of people during the pandemic were not resting. I think
Right.
of those first responders and those who really are essential. So many who weren't essential were in a quieter period. And so I could sort of hide a little bit for a time. And that was in many ways healthy for me to just have that break.
Take a
Looking
pause.
back, I can yeah, there was an online retreat that I remember finding during those days, and that was really one anchor that helped to bring me some stability and some hope, and keep me on track and connected in my spiritual life, which was for me was just really important in those days.
Mm. Well, thank you for naming some things because, um, I know I went through some of the very same things. I mean, we all had that common journey. But if you lost your job, and if you're listening and you lost your job during that time, or had to change positions or walk through some of what Kathy is, I love that you named there was so much loss,
Mhm.
right? Of
Yeah.
friendships, of routines, of rhythms, of knowing what to do. And I think in many ways we're still coming out of some of those losses, even though, we're a year or so out now from that level of shutdown. Um, I think we're still coming out of some of those losses, as many people, much like yourself, or maybe someone who is listening in that might be you as a listener. Um, we're rebuilding like the new person that we are, and might be invited to that spiritually, emotionally, physically. Many people moved locations to find different jobs, left family, left friends. So there's a lot of transition that happened
Mhm.
for you that you named. And now here you are with this new business. I know in the last 2 months before we started recording, we talked about how we haven't really seen each other a lot inside of our community in the past couple of months because you've been speaking and training
Mhm.
and leading
Mhm.
workshops. Just to kind of bring us into your world a little bit, what are the things that you've been doing? What are some of the things that you're really passionate about as you've grown into this new entrepreneurial venture that you're doing?
Yeah, it's the two primary pieces are coaching and presenting, or I would say the facilitated presentations is the phrase I
Mm-hmm.
like because I'm not just a trainer or a speaker who works from a script and delivers a message and is done, right? It's very interactive with the different tools that I use. So some of the coaching, it's been I've had a goodly number of one-on-one appointments and some clients that way. In September, I launched the second cohort of a group coaching process I have that actually utilizes the real life process.
Mm-hmm.
We take the real life process and we put it in my business, which is Teal Horizon Coaching. So we call that process Be Real, Be Teal.
Be real, be
It's a
teal.
nice
I love it.
mashup of those two processes. So I've had a couple of cohorts actually starting on those. And then I've had the presentations. Some have been about CliftonStrengths, some have been using the real life process. It's just been really exciting. And people often ask me, well, which do you like better, the coaching or the presenting? and I really can't choose, or at least not
I
yet.
can't
Maybe at
either. I
some
like
point,
both. Yeah.
yeah, maybe at some point the business will take a turn and lean more heavily into one than another. But I like the variety of both. I find that when I do many presentations, I start craving more of the one-on-one or at least small group pace and the slower pace of coaching. If I'm away from the presenting world for too long, I start to miss that as well. So I really just like to have that variety and that balance in my schedule.
And I love that you bring that up about the variety piece, because I know for many business owners, it doesn't matter if you're brick and mortar or if you're working from home and have a business that you're building, that's some of the online type things that you're doing, kind of learning to stay in your lane is part of the journey, right? So for you, because I think if you're listening and you own a business, or you're trying to grow a business and you're also working full time or doing some of those things, it is that there's a lot of shiny objects out there that can detract us, right? And we talk about this a lot in the community that we have, and the thing of like, here's the next thing you could be doing. You could add in, if you're a business owner that has products, we could add in this product line. We could add more inventory. And the way many online people add that is, here's another tool. Here's another thing you could do. That becomes our inventory. How has that been for you, Kathy, now that you've been in kind of this world for 2 or 3 years? How do you kind of determine your yeses and your nos as a business owner?
That's such a good question. And I'm going to be really honest to say I have somewhat of an answer, and I'm right there in the thick of it.
Yeah.
So there's a little piece of me that feels almost disingenuous giving an answer, because I too can be attracted by the shiny buttons. A case in point is I'm currently working on creating a digital course, and what form exactly that takes, I'm still deciding. And I have not even really launched one digital course, and I have in my mind at least 3 that I'd love to launch in the next
Well,
year.
at least you have chosen a lane, right? I really
Right?
think I like digital
One
courses.
lane,
Yeah.
and then there's
And
other
you have
things.
several ideas to do a
Yeah,
repeatable process around
absolutely.
that. So I'm going to say that's progress, because
So
as business owners, we're all, I was talking with some people that own more of a brick and mortar the last couple of weeks. And for them, it's, if you buy this much inventory, you'll save this much money. And I know you and I have had those conversations, even probably when you were deciding to do this course training about, is this a good investment, and how you weigh that, pros and
And
cons list, or doing a mind map around it to say, how long will I be able to use the leverage that I gain? So I'm glad you have 3 courses in mind, because that's going to be worth your money, right?
but you're so the but I think what does keep me on track, or at least in a ballpark, are some of those key terms. You just mentioned one of them, which is investment. I really try to look at things in terms of an investment, certainly of money, but also, and maybe more especially, in terms of time. In fact,
Mm.
that's one of the things I incorporate whenever I'm doing a presentation around time management, using some of the tools of the real life process. I invite people to think about using time the way we want to use money. We don't want to waste it. We know we have to spend it, but it's even better when we can invest it. So, what are the things that I might invest my time in that will yield? Well, maybe they're not going to generate more time, but they might free up my time down, some parts of my time down the road, because of what I'm investing, right
Mm-hmm.
now. So investment is one of those key principles for me. It's been really helpful, honestly, to just sort of diagram my business in kind of in a funnel sort of mode. I actually took something that I learned years and years ago in ministry, an old ministry model called the wedge model. And we talk
Mm.
about like how Jesus, preached on the hillsides to thousands, but he had about 72 that were those disciples, and then there's 12, right? And so the numbers decrease, and it was this model of a triangle on its side. And I realized that in many ways the business that I'm forming has some of those same principles. And so when I really had this epiphany moment of, I do know kind of how to build a business because I know how to build a ministry. So can I just
Yes.
apply those same principles in a slightly different context? That made it much more approachable and doable for me. And so
So
for me,
interesting.
documenting that, and being able to see, okay, where does this go on the funnel? Which part of the funnel is getting attention? Is it the right part? Which other part is not getting attention that might need attention? And then incorporating the tools of the real life process. Like when we talk about projects and really trying to be careful about bandwidth and how many projects I can take on. I'd love to do 10 to 12 projects every quarter.
Wouldn't
And
we
I've
all?
tried and I've failed.
And it doesn't
And
work.
and
Yes.
right. And so I just it's a hard and it's a constant battle for me because I do have these achieving tendencies and I want to do all the things and I want to do them all now. But I recognize I just simply can't. And so bandwidth, investment, and being really
Those are
choosy about projects.
two great things as a business owner for us to look at. I want to back up to you the wedge
Mhm,
model because it's so interesting. I was
mhm,
just in the home church that I'm a part of is going through something we're calling a partner course, how to really
mhm,
be a partner with the body and come into that. And we just talked through that idea of, preaching on the hillside to the masses and then having a smaller group of 70 in a home setting. And then, Jesus is with the 12 and then he's with the 3 and then he's with the 1.
right.
And that idea of it is, I actually looked at one of the people on our team who's also in the church, Lindsay, that works with us with our One Life maps. And I looked across the room at her and I'm like pointing at the chart going, we need to talk about that. And just,
Mhm,
as you said, from this wedge model of ministry of where are we investing our time? And
mhm,
in any business, you have that out to the masses
mhm,
and you have that, smaller circle, smaller, and clear down to one coaching, right? And so valuing our time. And if we're passionate about the work that we're doing, and it doesn't matter, from, like I said, the brick and mortar store or service that you
mhm,
provide to an online business, we have a reason we do what we do, but our
mhm,
time to do that sometimes is limited. We can't be with everyone one on
right.
one, right?
Mhm,
But we
mhm,
can provide resources or ways that people can connect with us, which I want to go to two places with you.
mhm,
One is I want to hear about this word teal because it is a huge part of what you do as a brand, as a market. You grabbed onto it early on
mhm.
and even just celebrated your birthday with all things teal. I remember seeing that post on social. But tell me
Mhm.
about teal. And then I
Yeah,
want to explore kind of this new thing that you are doing in an online course. But first, tell
yeah.
me about teal.
So I'll tell you about teal. Um, Years and years ago, I was in a store with my shopping buddy and pulled yet another teal shirt off the rack. There's multiple choices in color, but I am always drawn to that color. And I'm looking at it, and she comes over and says, I think you have a teal problem. And I looked at her, and I'm holding this lovely shirt, looked at her, looked at the shirt, looked at her, and said, I don't see the problem. So that's the funny story is that truly it's been my favorite color for years and years. It's a color I like. I'm always drawn to it. I'll say selfishly or whatever. I think it looks good on me. It always lights me up. I feel good when I wear it. It makes me
I love
feel
it too,
right.
obviously.
Right. So that's the fun part of like, okay, teal's my favorite color. And then during the pandemic, during that twisty turny journey, and I was doing lots of learning, I stumbled around the theory of spiral dynamics, or sometimes it's called integral spirituality. It's a bit of both. There's some management stuff that uses these colors, and there's some spirituality that uses them. But aside from all of that, I can cut to the chase to say different periods in human history can sort of be characterized by different colors that are symbolized or that represent different characteristics. And we see this play out in individuals, and we see it even in organizations.
Wow.
And teal color of the worldview or this level of consciousness that we are living into as humanity right now. And it's characterized by self-leadership, wholeness, and purpose. And when I read that and kind of, looking at all these colors and thinking of different organizations and different people and different how that shows up. And then I got to Teal and read self-leadership, or sometimes you'll see in an organizational setting, they'll say self-management, wholeness, and purpose. And I went, like, I couldn't have chosen. My business was in a baby stage at that point. It didn't even have a name. And I thought, I could not have chosen 3 words that better described what's important to me and what I really want my business to bring into the world. And so that was just sort of on my mind. And as we went through, I was working with a branding consultant as I started the business. And part of that was around a naming process. And we were having an ideation session and just brainstorming lots of possibilities. And one of the people in the session knew me well. It's one of my clients and a friend. And she mentioned Teal because, well, it's me. And someone else in the group who didn't know me said, well, why Teal? And I quickly explained what I just said here about self-leadership, wholeness, and purpose. And they went, you have to use that in your name.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just because of the interest of the 3 words. He watched how I lit up as I talked about it.
Yes.
And so it was that confirmation for me. I sort of ducked it at first. I said, no, isn't that going to be odd for people? It's going to be confusing. No one's going to understand it. And, a little bit of as convincing as all it took was that it was interesting, but not too weird. And so I leaned in, obviously, as the company name, but really I have leaned into those 3 pillars
you have.
through the work that I do. And that's really after the name, and I was in those early stages, and then I found the real life process. And, to boot, your colors are teal. So I was in.
Yes.
But when I learned about the process and all of where it comes from and what it does for people, and I saw those 3 things so clearly. Yes. And I thought, this is a tool that I need to put in the Teal toolbox.
Yes. Yeah, it's in the Teal toolbox, and I'm proud that it's there. For you who are listening that are business owners, and maybe you're in some of those beginning stages, and when I coach with people that are new to business, where they're in coaching or, here in my local community or small business owner, whatever it might be, the name thing always comes up. Like, do I go with my own name? Do I go with something unique? Where does the name come from? Where does the brand come from? The colors that I use, all those things are important, but it's okay to go super unique, because sometimes it will make you stand out. And if you are passionate about it, as you are about Teal, like I can't imagine your business, Teal Horizon Coaching, being anything else than what it is, because it's you. Just like I have a story behind the real life process and how that became the name. It's unique, it's different, and it has taken me a while for that to become the name, right? But within 3 to 4 years, people start to associate your name with that brand. And so there's a whole conversation we could have there about the uniqueness of brands and names and all of those things. But if your gut deep within is like, no, this is me. And as you just heard Kathy describe her name, I just love how much it ties to a story that you have and to who you are. But there's an actual word in there that you mentioned that I want to pull out just a little bit more on, because I know that you've been working on this and you've done a lot in 2023. You've created group coaching programs. You've done a lot of speaking, workshop leading, facilitating, all the things you talked about. But you're really excited about some things that you're going to do new and fresh in 2024. It's the thing about business. It's always in the next iteration, like kind of, okay, I've built some foundation. Now where am I going? So tell me about 2024, and I believe it's pulling out this thread of self-leadership. Is that where we're headed?
It is, because I've recognized that while all 3 of those words, self-leadership, wholeness, purpose, are important, to me, the foundation is always self-leadership. And the other 2 grow from that, right? When I am leading my own life, not just living it, not just existing, not just in default mode and, and riding the waves as wherever they take me, but trying to make some intentional decisions about my life and choices, lead my life according to my needs, my values, my priorities, all of those things we talk about in the real life process. When I'm able to do that, I can make decisions about my whole life. So that's the wholeness piece, right? I'm doing that not just in work, but in my family life and in my friends, with my social life and my spiritual life. So it really is about that idea of taking initiative and taking ownership to make choices, and to live as responsibly and as accountably as I can. And I believe in doing all of that is how we discover and live into our purpose. So I don't think purpose just falls out of the sky into our lap. I don't think people talk about, I'm going to find my purpose. Oh, did I leave it here under this notebook, or did I lose it someplace? Like, I don't find it that way. I find it by, to me, going inward, and going deep. And so that's where self-leadership really comes from. It's one of the taglines in some ways that I use is tying the three pieces together. It's lead your whole life with purpose. But that self-leadership piece, I think, is where it starts. And as I look back at my own story, even going all the way back to when I was a teenager, kind of one of the key points in my life where the trajectory changed. I was 14 years old, and I was at a week-long leadership training program for high school students, one of those kind of youth camps. It's a program that later, if you fast forward in my story, I was blessed to have the opportunity to not only be a volunteer leader, but to actually direct that program, right?
Oh,
and here I am.
That's amazing.
It's those pieces of my story fit so nicely and so well
together. The threads keep going, yeah.
Oh, it's crazy. And so I learned so much about leadership in that week, but I most importantly learned about myself, learned that I did in fact have gifts to share, that I was unique in some ways. I found that there were people who affirmed me and that I belonged. And God became real to me. Like, it was that week was the whole package.
Yeah.
It was leadership skills,
great.
it was self-awareness, and especially as a 14-year-old, with all the questions that
That's
a 14-year-old
life moment on the map, for sure.
And so when I look back at it, as much as what we learned was, I would say, group leadership skills in terms of communication and planning and decision making and styles of leadership, and I still teach those sometimes today. But I've realized more and more that the foundation of all of those is self-leadership. I have to have an ability to lead my own life and to make good decisions and understand values and live from that sense of priority. Because if I can't lead my own life, I really most likely cannot effectively or fruitfully lead other people. And so for me, that's where I'm recognizing that is really the core of my kind of passion when I think about the work that I do with clients, whether it's with strengths. That again is self-leadership. You have these gifts, you have these natural talents. How are you going to develop them? Right? If I am working with somebody through the Enneagram tool, it's okay. This is what an assessment might say, or this is what you might discover about yourself. What do you want to do with that?
What do you want to do with it? That is such a part of this self-leadership, self-management type thing. Is at its core, we get to choose.
Yeah.
We get to choose how our life is. I mean, I talk with that so much with my clients. And if you're listening, I want you to hear, if you're listening well, and you might be driving, working out, doing all the things that we do on podcasts, but hear that you get to choose how you lead yourself. And Kathy, you have modeled that so well as we've known each other in the past few years. And, I'm a blimp on the life map dot of your story, but I've seen you lead yourself well through this journey of being a business owner, building your business. And I think it is at the core of anyone who, you may feel that your hair is on fire, but if you'll come into this self-leadership part, nobody's doing it to you. You get to choose your own way and path that God has for you in discernment with Him. As we talk about creating that rule of life, rule of life is self-leadership. It really is at its core. So I know that you're really diving into this in 2024. I
Yeah.
know that you're
So
going to create it into what you had said. You're investing in some online courses and different things. So what I will say is you want to connect with Kathy. So as you're listening today, Kathy's going to give you some ways that you can connect with her. We'll have it in our show notes, but these are some things she'll have coming out. So you want to make sure you're on her list, that you're a part of, just staying in touch with her in all the places. But she wants to give you one direct link today. So, Kathy, I'm going to let you say it for the podcast listeners, and then I will make sure it's in our show notes and in other places as we put this podcast out. But where could they go right now to connect with you? What do you have for us?
yeah, the best place is at my website, which is tealhorizoncoaching.com. And specifically related to what we were just talking about, tealhorizon.com// that is overwhelm.
Okay.
Reason that specific URL, tealhorizoncoaching.com/overwhelm, is that one of the things that I find in my own life, and I find it in others, is that one of the things that really can be the obstacle that prevents us from leading our life, from making those choices, from even sometimes feeling like we can make a choice, or which choice do we make is overwhelm.
Mm-hmm.
We are just so frequently, so many of us find ourselves paralyzed or find ourselves stuck. And so what I've done is create a simple free training that I just want to get out to as many people as possible, because I know that I'm not the only one who struggles with overwhelm.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little free training, 4 videos in total, all together less than or just about 45 minutes, and you don't have to watch it or listen to it in
Perfect.
one setting. But it is overcoming overwhelm and unsticking stuck. Because when I
Great
talk with
title.
clients and people, it's what I hear all over and over again is they want to move forward in their lives, but they feel overwhelmed. They want to move forward, but they feel stuck. Those are 2
Mm-hmm.
words that come up time and time again. And so regardless of what exactly your source of overwhelm is, doesn't matter. I'm fairly confident that training's going to be helpful because it's a tried and true tool and a process that I use over and over again whenever I start feeling that bit of being overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
Can't promise you I'm going to get rid of overwhelm. I don't think anybody can. It's a part of humanity, especially in these days and this day and this age. But what we
Absolutely.
can do, again, is a tool of self leadership, which is how do I deal with it instead of allowing the overwhelm to swallow me and
Right.
sink me?
Creating a process for that. So tealhorizoncoaching.com/overwhelm will get you that little video series. You're going to love it. You want to be on Kathy's list. I will say this, and I'm not just saying this because she's my guest today. Kathy's is one of the weekly blogs that I read every week, partly because I love seeing how she incorporates the tool of the real life process into the work she's doing. But I just love what she writes about and what she shares about. It's everyday, ordinary, real stuff. And I'm still living in it. Kathy's still living in it. But what we love is helping you in overcoming that overwhelm. So you want to connect with Kathy so you can find out about this course that she's going to
Yeah.
be putting out on self leadership. If you're on her list, you'll find out all about it. So,
Yeah.
Kathy, thanks so much for being with me today. We could go on and on, talk about so many different things. But, and if you haven't connected with us here at the process, I want to say this before we sign off today, Kathy. We are kind of launching something new in 2024 too, which is a community that will be kicking off. Kathy will be there. She's a part of our community. So she'll be in our free community as well. So it's another place you can connect with her. But we're not quite ready to launch it till the first of the year, but we want you to know about it. So all you have to do is go to thereallifeprocess.com/join, and you'll be one of the first to know about how to join this new community that will have all kinds of resources and things for you to connect with. And great coaches and great people like Kathy will be there to serve you. This is not just for coaches this is for everybody and anybody who wants to live from rest, not rush. So, Kathy, thanks again for being my guest today and bringing
So well.
great value to you as a listener. So, I just appreciate so much and the work you're doing. and sharing your story a little bit with us.
Thanks.
Uh,
Always happy to be of help. That's always my goal. Share enough of
yes.
my story that it can inspire others to lead their own lives.
Well, when what you share, going clear back to going, wow, this was where I started. The pandemic changed some things. And I know if you're listening, you have probably that story too. But, what came out of it? What was the next place as you did your own self-leadership and pulled it forward? So thanks for sharing with us. We'll be back next week with more from the Doing What Matters podcast. And remember that every ordinary day has an extraordinary moment. You just have to look for them. And we'll see you next week. Thanks so much.